and welcome to episode 40 of Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. And a happy new year! We made it to 2021. Despite the fact that I think there were times when we kind of wondered whether we would. New year, new start, new optimism. A lot depends on your point of view. At the moment, I think I'm feeling quite optimistic, especially for these podcasts. So for the next hour and a bit, however long it takes, we're going to enjoy some photography talk. So here we are, live on Facebook. Leave me comments, let me know you're here, let me know where you're from. And so, coming up tonight, let me just click over, no, not that one, and that. So tonight then, what I'm going to be talking about is a shoot I did at Rosefield Mills, an old abandoned mill and warehouse in Dumfries, where we did a 1920s style shoot based on the TV series Peaky Blinders, and it's proved to be probably one of my most popular or talked about photo shoots, certainly locally. It's the one whenever I meet anybody and they kind of go, "Oh, you're the photographer. Oh, you did the Peaky Blinders shoot." Yeah. So yes, based on that, inspired by the TV series. So I thought I would talk about that, about what went on in the creating of the shoot, and some of the techniques and things that I used behind it. Also, there's the critique section where people have been submitting images throughout the week for me to give some kind of feedback on. So VG is trying to explore the notion of light trails, doing sort of slightly longer exposures of a few seconds as traffic moves past in the street. So she's looking for a few hints and tips about how to work on that. Becca has been playing around with this picture of a stag. She's cloned bits out in the mid-ground and is looking for some feedback on this photo. Lucas has created this shot of the pier, but he was trying to go for, again, a long exposure. But he's wanting to get some ideas of how to create a kind of long exposure so you get a very kind of smooth, silky sea, but without having to go out and buy some ND filters. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Sandra takes photos of her nephew. Yes, goes out on a number of days each year with her nephew, takes photos of him, and is looking for some ideas and thoughts about ways of doing a bit of photography on the streets, which could be interesting for the photo shoot she does. And then Robert created this set of photos of a match lighting and sort of put them together, and he's wondering on ways that he could have sort of improved the composition or the putting together of this. So that's what we're going to be looking at this evening. As I say, we're live here on Facebook. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you're from. Join in the comments. As I'll be periodically checking in. If you have questions as we go, if you want to comment on anything as we're going, I will periodically look over, check, and be able to feed back to you. I can see that we've already got a couple of regulars in saying hi. And so they're a friendly bunch. Chat amongst yourselves as well. Also, if you happen to find any of this useful, interesting, and you would like to support the podcast, then there's always buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres, where you can contribute. It's not compulsory, but it is always appreciated. I'll take a quick look at the comments, see what we've got. Hi, Robert's howdy from Texas. Hi, Robert. Afternoon from Stacey. Happy New Year with hopes of a better year ahead. Yeah, I think we're all kind of feeling that. Robert's come back in with a Happy New Year, y'all. Maggie, good evening to everyone. Peaceful New Year to Becca. Happy New Year to everyone. Diana, Happy New Year from Wales. Hi, Diana and Becca. Lucas, good evening, everyone. Glad you could make it along, Lucas. Rosie, Happy New Year, everyone. So that's Rosie from about 50 miles down the road here, Whithorn. Jill from Yorkshire is saying hi. Hi, Jill. Maya from Jerusalem is good evening. Hi, Maya. Gary Allen from Glasgow. We met once at Scottish Tattoo Convention in Edinburgh. Okay, Gary. I do remember the Scottish Tattoo Convention. That was quite an amazing place. There's all these stalls, all these places where you've got all these tattooists come together. And I had a connection there, somebody who let me in. So yeah, now one day I might actually talk about that, as that was a lot of fun. It's good to. Okay, Gary, well, thanks for reminding me where we met. That's great. Sandra says Happy New Year, everyone. Hi, Sandra. Oh, VG's here. Well done, VG. Glad you could make it along. VG's in India, so 5.5 hours ahead. So it's 1 o'clock in the morning for VG. Brian, hi, Kim. Nice to be with you again. Happy New Year to you and your family and all who are tuning in. Glad you could make it along, Brian. VG's also Happy New Year to friends. Oh, Tracy's made it. Happy New Year, Kim, to you and yours and everyone else on. Had to tune in for this one. Well, yes, Tracy's the star of this. This whole photo shoot wouldn't have happened without Tracy. So I'll come on to that in a minute. So yeah, do say hi to Tracy. Okay, cool. Like I say, I will periodically check in on the comments. I don't tend to leave them permanently open because then I get distracted and I don't get around to talking about what I'm supposed to be. So leave the comments, let me know you're here, and chat amongst yourselves, ask questions, and we'll keep it going. Cool. Right. Okay. Oh, Stacey says she's been to a tattoo convention. Oh no, they've had tattoo conventions here, have yet to go to one. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether you ever plan on having a tattoo or not. I don't actually have any tattoos, but it's a fascinating place to go and look around. Right, okay, so what we're going to do now then is I'm going to talk about the Peaky Blinders shoot. Now, essentially what happened, to give a little bit of background to this, is there's a old building in Dumfries. Dumfries in southwest Scotland. It's about 20 miles up the road from where I live. And the River Nith runs through Dumfries. And on one side of it is this large old building. It was a mill, Rosefield Mills. And in its heyday, was a big employer in the town and a beautiful building. But then it stopped being used, fell into rack and ruin, and was basically a kind of crumbling building. And in fact, let's just pull up this photo, I can kind of give you a couple of shots of these are just kind of quick screen grab. This building here, you can see it's got the trees. It's got trees pretty much growing out of the roof of it as well. But you can see it's a beautiful old building. And anyway, it's sort of been sitting on that. This here is a kind of an aerial view, and then there's kind of these old warehouse bits at the back as well, which are part of it. Not these two on the edge here for some reason, but these three on the left, this bit of ground, and this building in the forefront. That's all Rosefield Mills. And basically what happened was it came up for auction. And the Dumfries Historic Buildings Trust, I know a couple of the people who work, who are behind it, it's all about kind of saving and repurposing some of the wonderful old buildings in Dumfries. And this was one that's just sort of been, like you can see, it's just been absolutely falling apart. And but the thing was with this was that it was going to be relatively cheap. I mean, still tens of thousands of pounds, but tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands. And so Dumfries Historic Buildings Trust decided that what they wanted, so they put on a campaign to try and raise funds to get hold of it for use for the residents and communities of Dumfries. And so because I'm kind of interested, wanted to help out, know some of the people involved, I said I would put in a photo shoot as maybe an auction item that to help raise a few funds. In the end, it went into a raffle, and I remember being sort of slightly uncertain about that. I mean, more than happy for raising funds for the building, but on a photographer's side of it, there's a thing whereby what happens is in if you've got like an auction and people are bidding for the photo shoot, you tend to have people who are really interested in having a photo shoot, and so you auction. Whereas if it's a raffle, and I've had this before, you can get people who sort of win the prize who don't really know what to do with it, aren't really bothered with it, and if you're really lucky, you might get to photograph that cat for them. So I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen. Anyway, Tracy, I mentioned earlier, and has tuned in this evening. Tracy won the raffle, and we weren't sure what to do. We met up at In-House Chocolates for a nice cup of hot chocolate, and some of you will have heard me talking about before. In fact, a couple of weeks ago I was talking about the shoot I did for In-House Chocolates, that 7 Deadly Sins of Chocolate, for anybody who remembers that one. Wonderful place. And initially Tracy was kind of, I'm not really sure, haven't really thought about that, what do we do? And I, in fact, she was even sort of starting to say, maybe you should let somebody else have this photo shoot who can do something with it. I'm saying, no, look, you won the raffle fair and square. Let's explore some ideas. You don't have to have a straightforward portrait. We could have some fun with this. You could get a few friends together, dress up, do something. And as we started to explore the ideas, suddenly she lit up and we started talking about Peaky Blinders. Now, Peaky Blinders, for those who don't know, is a series. It's had 4 series now, 4 or 5 series on BBC. It's set in the 1920s in Birmingham, in England, and it's a very violent but very stylised, beautifully shot series. Gangsters in Birmingham, basically, and it is beautiful. I mean, the director of photography for Peaky Blinders is just stunning. Pretty much watch any episode, pause it at any place, and you could pretty much print that off and create a beautiful photo out of it. The lighting is incredible. The photography in it is stunning, and it's a fantastic series. Certainly the first 3 series were really absolutely amazing. The script writing was incredible. The last series did feel like it kind of went off. No, sorry, I'm tangenting again. It doesn't really matter. But what happened was Tracy said, actually, she had her and her husband had just sort of watched the first 3 series in a box set and were absolutely besotted with it. And she had a friend who was coming up to his birthday, I think, and they decided they were going to do a Peaky Blinders themed birthday. With that in mind, her and several of their friends had already started getting outfits for it. So we thought, okay, this could kind of be fun. And then Mark, who had been one of the people involved in the Dumfries Historic Buildings Trust, they were successful in their bid. They got the building, and he said to me, well, look, as a kind of, if you want, you can use the building for doing a photo shoot. Now, the Peaky Blinders set in Birmingham is a very industrial background. There's lots of smoke, there's buildings, there's warehouses. So suddenly the idea of having several people shot in an old abandoned warehouse became a really exciting idea. And then as I talked further, it turned out Tracy had a horse as well, and horses feature strongly in Peaky Blinders. And before we knew it, I've got 10 people in period costume, 1920s costume, and a horse, and an abandoned warehouse to shoot it in. Well, these kind of opportunities don't come by every day. So I really wanted to try and do something special with it. And one of the things I noticed when looking at a lot of the stills photography and the promo photography for Peaky Blinders was they were nearly always, you would see them striding towards the camera, looking mean and moody. And there was always lots of smoke and light about. So I thought, well, okay, could we do smoke bombs? Could we do, coloured gels in cutting through the smoke and stuff like that? And it all started sounding like a lot of fun to do, a lot of organisation. We went out and did a recce, and now just to show you the inside of the. So the actual main stone building itself was just a bit too crumbly and a bit too dark, and had some old vehicles left inside it. But just behind it, there was there was this part here which sort of stretched back, and we thought part of the roof's missing, But we thought, okay, this has the possibility of being a good place to do the shoot. So what I'll do now is I will show you a behind the scenes video, because the other thing was, doing a shoot like this, I thought I've got to get this recorded. So I grabbed hold of a couple of photographer friends of mine, Andy Jardine and Alan Wright, and said, look, can you do some behind the scenes filming for me? And they shot some video for me. What was great as well was Andy has a drone, so he was able to do, in fact, those external shots that I just showed you were screen grabs from his drone. So, managed to get some really nice shots to give you a sense of what the actual shoot was like. So what I'll do is I'll flip over to that now, and where are we? Here we go. I'll talk you through it. Just turn that music down a bit. So here's the building, as you can see from the outside. Here's Tracy bringing the horse in. Here's me start checking that all the lights are being set up. You can see people turning up, partially dressed in costume or fully dressed or almost dressed except for their shoes. There's Mark, who is then helping me out as well. The problem's, of course, shooting with a live horse. Shot of Tracy's husband Chris up on the back of the horse. There's a lot of shots in Peaky Blinders of guy in suit on the back of horse. Looks really cool. So you can see I've set up the camera. Here we've got smoke bomb going off. In the background, Mark was running past. Basically, actually, I'll pause that a sec, because you can just see Mark in the background with his with his red cap here. And what we were using were smoke pellets, which things like chimney sweeps, or you would use to put in a stove, or to see if the flue is working, to see if there's any blockages up the chimney. You stick a smoke pellet in, and then you can go outside and see whether the smoke's coming out the top or whether it's just coming back in and filling up your room. So you can buy a pack of 10 smoke pellets for about £8 or something like that, about $10, and you get about 30 seconds of smoke out of them. Now they burn down very quickly, and you don't want to be holding them in your hand. So Mark basically had a pair of pliers, held it in the pliers, lit the smoke bomb, and then ran along behind, swishing the smoke around, and then ran out of shot. And at this point, we would get them to walk forward, and then the lights would go off. Now, what I've done is I've got key light. Actually, I'll talk about the lighting afterwards. Let's just kind of carry on with the video. So you can see they're striding forward. The smoke's behind them. I've got light behind coming in, and that's the kind of shot we were ending up with. We also decided we would sort of have a little bit of fun staging a fight scene. So half of them holding on to the other half's arms, pulling back like they were about to lay into each other. And here you can see me working around with the lighting at the back. I mean, actually, I'll just pause there for a moment, because what I want to show you, and I can't quite zoom in here, but is to notice the difference between the ambient light. You can see that it's just a kind of dull daylight. It was slightly drizzly, and how the light turns out in the shots themselves. Because in the shots, what I've done is I've dialed down the exposure settings so that essentially, when I fire the camera, they're only lit by the flashes rather than the ambient light. And that's why the photos turn out much more moody than you would expect from just sort of looking at the ambient light there. So to run that, you carry on, you can see me zooming in on the back of the camera. So there's Mark's swirling the smoke around and then leaping out a shot, getting everybody to move forward. And we did this several times, just sort of taking different shots and then trying to show everybody what was going on in the background. And here we've got the full cast list, including Wallace the pony, the cob rather, the horse. So that sort of shows you then all what was going on with that. I'll tell you what, I'll flip back to the comments for a moment, and then I'll come back in and talk a little bit more. I'll go through some of the photos with you and talk a bit more about how I was doing the lighting. So let's pull up the comments. What have we got? Oh, Katie's here. Katie's saying hi, Tracy. So Katie was also one of the women involved in the beautifully dressed up in the 1920s skit. So glad you could make it, Tracy. Sorry, glad you could make it, Katie. Becca says, I have a couple. It would be a fantastic opportunity to photograph some artwork being done. VG, I have one interesting to photograph. I must have missed a comment somewhere. Not sure quite what you're referring to there. You have one what? Okay, we'll come back to it. Stacey says she has a couple. I have a couple, right? You're talking horses? Are you talking abandoned warehouses? Or you're talking outfits? Okay. Right. VG saying season 5. Oh, Abby. Hello, Abby. Says, I love Peaky Blinders. Stacey, Netflix. VG, my dad was shocked. I was pretty shocked myself. I never thought I've missed. I don't think this is showing me all the comments here. I seem to have missed out a chunk of something. I'm not quite sure where the conversation's going. Doesn't really matter. Rosie says, I didn't know horses were in Peaky Blinders. I will watch it now. I thought it was always too violent for me. Tracy says, Rosie, I don't like violent things either, but it totally got me hooked. And yes, there's horses in there. Yes, there's a lot to do with horses. Hannah's here as well. Nice to relive this. Yeah, Hannah was another one of the stars of the show as well. So this is great. I mean, I'm so glad some of you have managed to make it over to watch this video. So where are we? And now now there's tattoos. Haha about the tattoo. There's bits of conversation I'm going on. I've now lost it completely. Right. I don't know whether you're responding to other bits. Maybe Facebook just isn't showing me enough of the, of the comments. Never mind. Okay, let's go back to the photos. I want to talk you through some of these photos. So let's show you the big one first. So in essence, this was the kind of the big main one. And what we've got, you can see, so what I've done here is we've got our 10 people in costume. Here's Tracy, standing next to Chris, and of course Wallace. Here's Hannah, here's Katie. So glad you could make it along. And you've got these big doors open in the background. And what I've done is behind them, I've got two off-camera flashes with orange gels on them. And the orange gives that kind of fire type light to it. Whereas over on the right, I've got another one with a blue gel on it, which that kind of creates a much cooler colouring, which offsets against the orange. And then sort of just behind my shoulder, or just off to the left, just in front of me, but out of sight, I've got another two flashes which are the kind of the key light, which are lighting them up. So in essence, I've got 5 off-camera flashes going at the same time. And so I've got to light them up from it's quite a big space, but the key thing was about getting these off-camera flashes behind them, and then running the smoke between the lights and the people, so that the lights are behind the smoke. And then when the light hits the smoke, it hits all the smoke particles and kind of dissipates out, and it's so beautifully atmospheric. And so if you're going to do this, if you're going to do anything like this, you have a mate or a friend with either smoke bombs or smoke pellets. Make sure you've got a way of holding. Like I say, we were using a pair of pliers so that you don't burn your fingers, and then get them to move the smoke about and then leap out of shot. Put the lights behind the smoke and you just end up with the most fantastic effects. Then, in fact, what happened as well was one of the photos, the front light didn't go off, and we just ended up with this silhouette, which I also edited up because I just thought, actually, that looks really cool as well. That was a lot of fun. Then we decided to do just the lads together, and this notion that sort of walk towards the camera, but you've got to own the space. I mean, whenever you watch them on the program, they kind of stride towards almost kind of alpha gorilla kind of, you know, there's no messing about. They completely, poof, this is our space, nothing apologetic, nothing scared, absolute ownership and overconfidence, you know, complete confidence. And we're trying to catch that. Smoke and light, I was just really caught up with that. Then we got the women to do the same. And I love this shot. It's just so, yeah, I love the light and I love the attitude that's just pouring out of each of them. So much fun. And then here's the shot we did of the fight setup again. I did try one with the smoke, but it didn't work quite as well. I felt with the fight scene it worked better without the smoke. But it still got the orange light behind, which, you know, sort of separates them from the background. Here's one with Tracy and Chris up on the horse. Again, so I've got, you know, you can see that. You can see again behind Wallace the horse, we've got the orange light coming up in the edge of the face. I've got another light over to the left, and I've got a light, that light over to the right, which is catching the back of Chris here. So it's a kind of 3 light setup, and similarly here, it's either 2 or 3 light setup. I think it's 2. I think there's one coming from behind there, one coming from the side here, and there is a softer one just behind my shoulder as I'm taking the photo of it. I wanted a group shot. Here we go. Got the kind of group shot. What I also did though was I did a few shots of kind of 2 of them at a time. Andy and Peter are brothers. Said their mum wanted a shot of the 2 of them together. So we kind of, and then what I did was I did close up and I did full length as well. Then we had oh, that's awful. Suddenly my memory's gone on names. I know the names. That's really embarrassing. Apologies about that. Anybody want Tracy, you'll know. Quickly throw into the comments. Right. Of course, I'm about 10 seconds behind on this as well. So if you are writing these hastily down into the comments, then you know, I'm not picked. Okay, it doesn't really matter. We'll come back to it. I'll just have to swallow my embarrassment here. Wonderful. And then now just a little bit of talking about the lighting on this. I've turned around. We're now looking back up the length of the warehouse. But we're still in this ambient light. But you can see what I've done is, because I've dialed down so that really they're only being lit by, I've got my key light is over my right shoulder coming towards them, right as you're looking at the picture. And I've got off to the left behind them, I've got flash with an orange gel in it. And it kind of, because you can still see some of the light through the holes in the skylights. But it's looking much darker. It's almost like you can imagine them. There's a setting sun kind of breaking through another little window, which is just catching the edge of them as dusk is appearing. But you've seen the fact that the light itself was just an ambient dull day. And this is what happens. If you can control the lighting, then that allows you to kind of control the mood and the feel of it. And then here's Tracy and Chris looking wonderfully dead serious, which is exactly what I asked them to, and full length, wonderful outfits. And this was it. It was just such a fun shoot. Just, you know, and you know, like I said, not often you get the chance to shoot with 10 people in costume and a horse in an abandoned warehouse with smoke bombs, and again a couple of mates to video it. So be ambitious. That's my you want to learn anything from this, go for it, have fun. So yeah, huge amounts of fun. Thank you to everybody who took part in that. A lot of fun indeed. Okay, I could see more comments flying up, so let's go and see what we've got. Maggie says they are talking about tattoos. Oh, Stacey, the convention we were referring to. Oh, the tattoo convention. Oh, okay, so that was still going on, right. I'm sort of missing bits of the conversation. Okay. Stacey says that's a lot of flashes, but it did the job. Yep, that was one of the only times I've actually used all 5 flashes that I've got. Okay, Rosie says, how did Wallace cope with the flashes? I always keep them away from using flashes when photographing horses. That's a really good point. Now, I was fortunate in the fact that I'd already learnt about this. I'd actually done some horse photography for racing stables a year or so before. And basically what I knew I was going to be doing some horse portraits. And so I did quite a bit of research into this. And essentially, horses don't react to flashes. They'll react to... Now, if you've got a big umbrella, if you've got a big reflector, a big bright area, they will react to. But actually, just a flash shooting off, they don't register it. And I double check it first, just in case you end up with a horse who happens to be an exception to it. But actually, if you're just using the raw flash and you're not worrying about sort of putting it through an umbrella or something like that, the horse doesn't recognize it. And so there were no problems with the flashes going off. Wallace was brilliant, and the racing horses that I've photographed doing these horse portraits, same thing, never had the slightest problem. There was no nervousness, there was no sudden jolt, no moment of fright. The only other thing I learned about photographing horses, funny little trick, was I remember when I was doing the racing horses, I was told it's very, very important that their ears are pointing upwards. I'm not a horse person. You horse people will know this in portraits. And so the trick was to have a little packet of thumbtacks or drawing pins or something in your pocket, and you just give it a little shake, and then their ears come up, and then you go click. So there you go, extra brownie points if you remember that one next time you're photographing horses. So yeah, VG's agreeing the girls are brilliant. Lucas likes the mood. Sandra loved Peaky Blinders, but also biased because she's from Birmingham, and some of the outdoor scenes are shot in the Black Country Museum in Dudley. All right, okay, cool. Stacey loves the backlighting. Oh, Tracy is coming. Gail and Mary. Yeah, okay. Mary or Vary, depending on. It's spelled Mahairi. Some use Vary, some say Mary. A little bit depends on who's who. So, but yes, of course. So my apologies to Gail and Vary about that, or Mary. Rosie, costumes are fabulous. They really were. I was so impressed with the costumes that they created. And Rosie says, I've been around several horses all my life, and I've had several of my own, and never thought to ask the question. Shoot me now. I have a packet of Tic Tacs to shake. Yes. Okay, so yes, you'll know about the that little noise bit. Cool. Okay, so yeah, that's the story. Oh, not completely the final bit of the story. The fact was that then what happened was we put all these photos. Well, I wanted to get these photos up on social media, but we couldn't use them straight away because it turned out that Mark was going to be writing an article for Dumfries and Galloway Life magazine about the acquisition of Rosefield Mills for the Dumfries Historic Buildings Trust. So we were asked to hold off and not actually show anybody these photos until the article was printed. And then, so we thought it was going to be going out in August, but it didn't. And then it was going to sort of push back to September. And I was saying, look, we're going to be able to do it. No, and then I had to tell everybody, no, sorry, we've still got to hold off. And I think it was the October by the time it actually came out. But worth the wait. Where are we? DG Life we started this 6-page article, begins with a double-page spread of everybody looking absolutely fantastic. Then got these wonderful ones. This wonderful one of Chris up on the horse, and then Chris and Tracy up on the side with the writing, and then onto another one where we've got the fight scene, and it was just, and they even mention, at the bottom where you could go and view the video as well. So 6-page spread, using a whole chunk of the photos. It just ended up being like a major article in Dumfries and Galloway Life magazine. So that was an extra kind of bit of fun and thrill for everyone. So still ranks up there as one of my favourite photo shoots. A lot of fun, and it's also, it goes to, I mean, we didn't do the photos to go in the magazine, but as soon as there was an opportunity, the magazine just leapt at the idea of it. And it is one of those things that I've talked before, if you're doing professional photography, which is magazines are crying out for really good, interesting photos. They need good photos all the time, and mediocre photos will have all over the place. But if you could do something a little bit special, you've got much more chance of actually getting it published. Right, okay, so there we are with that. So, yes, hope you found that interesting. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move on to the critique section, where this is a chance for anybody, if we've got the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group. If you haven't joined it already, do join it. And what you can do then is you can submit images for a bit of feedback. Put your photo in, tell me where it is you're having difficulties, problems, what you're struggling with, and I'll do my best to help you with it. Also, what's been happening is there's quite a few people as well also have, sometimes other people will come in and comment and give you ideas too. So the idea behind these podcasts, the idea behind the group is really about everybody getting a chance, getting help in a kind of safe environment where you're not going to be humiliated, to advance your photography. So that's what this is all about. All right, Katie's put, Andy and I loved every minute of it. What an experience. Thanks so much, Kim. Well, thanks, Katie. Yeah, you looked absolutely fantastic, and it was a brilliant shoot. Right, okay, quick reminder, if you find these useful and you would like to support these podcasts, buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. Always appreciated. So, let's move on then. What we're going to talk about first, I think we'll start with VG. Now, VG, she first of all put this photo in and said, a busy night at Marina Beach a couple of days back. I tried to capture light trails with a slow shutter speed. Top layer lights is from the metro buses, which were lit so bright. Loved spending an hour trying to capture them on my way home from the office, so didn't have a tripod. Rested the camera on a parapet wall and clicked setting 3 seconds, after setting 3 seconds capture to avoid any shake. These are not final, they're not perfect. We'll try again at a junction or bridge. Wanted to share any inputs on how they could be better. She then went back the following night and created a couple more. And you can see the lights going here. Now, I think this was the, of them all, VG, this one is definitely my favourite, and I think that's because what we've got here is we've got the parked bike and we've got this kind of slightly spooky figure here just moving. And I think rather than just having straightforward light trails like that, although we've got a bit of a car over here as well, not quite so noticeable. Here you've just got the light trails, but I think kind of what we're up against here is the fact that you're looking for something of a little bit more interest. Okay, so VG went on to say with the second ones, tried again tonight, marginally better than the other day. It is usually a busy signal and junction, thought of capturing more trails. It started to rain and traffic lessened and I had to leave. Thanks for the nudge, Stacey and Lucas. Yeah, Stacey and Lucas have also been leaving a couple of comments in the group as well for tried taking your advice. Couple more tries. I hope to achieve crisp, perfect trails. Next stop should be from the top of a building or a flyover. Looking forward to hearing how I might be able to improve. So I think really, VG, one of the key things here when you're doing sort of light trail photography is you want to have an interesting photo with the light trails in them, rather than just the light trails themselves being the key or the only interest in the photo. I mean, when we look at this image here, you've put yourself here because you're obviously then getting your light trails, which is fine. But the dominant part of this photo is this red plastic barrier, which isn't particularly interesting. It's in the foreground and it's bright red, and so it grabs all the attention. It's right smack bang in the middle of it. And then sitting above it, we've got the clock tower, interesting clock tower, but we're not even really noticing the clock tower first because we notice the barrier here first. And I think and it's a very, very easy thing for us to fall into. It's a bit like if you do astrophotography, if you do stars. I remember doing this problem myself. Was the first night I went out to do try and photograph the stars, and I'm there absolutely freezing to death, pointing the camera up in a clear night on a cold winter night, taking all these 30-second exposure or 2-minute exposure photos of stars. And then when I got home and looked at them all, they just seemed fairly uninteresting. They were just dots on a thing. And then I went off and looked at some astrophotography and realised that all the best ones had a really interesting landscape in them, as well as the stars. And I realised at that point that if I was going to do a decent astrophotography, then what I needed to do was have an interesting landscape that then had the stars in it as well. And I think it's the same kind of thing when you come to sort of light trail photography with vehicles as well. Is what you want to do is you want to find a really interesting space. Now, second thing here is that your trails are going directly kind of horizontal across the width of the picture. And again, I think there's more to be had with the idea of depth. You talked about the idea of maybe a bridge. I think that would be a really good idea. If you can get up onto a footbridge or something that's over, and you've got then the road disappearing off down into the city or off into the distance. But if you've got a long road which is giving you these lovely leading lines into the picture, and then you get the light trails, the white on one side of the headlights and the red of the brake lights on the other side of the road, streaming, I think you can then end up with a far more interesting photo. But the idea is first of all, is the photo an interesting photo even if you didn't have the light trails in it? And then adding the light trails to it becomes particularly interesting. The next thing of that then is how long to do the light trails for. And part of that will also depend on where you are. If you've only got a short bit of road, you don't necessarily need to be doing something like a 30-second exposure. If you've got a really long road, if you're sort of sitting there and you can see the road disappearing far off into the distance, then 10, 20, 30-second exposures can be really good because you end up with these really long lines. But in a kind of short space, maybe you only want something like a third of a second or half a second or no more than 1 second, and actually have a bit of the ghost of the vehicle in it or the ghost of people in it. And so what that will do is, rather than it just being a coloured streak across the picture, it then becomes a sense of movement. And really, so yeah, what you're talking about is essentially there's two different ways of using the light trail. One is to convey a sense of movement, which is the other is just patterns, it's lines. And for those patterns, that's where you really need to have the landscape of it looking good, that you're adding the patterns to. But for the movement, you also need to have a good background, and that the movement is happening within. But it might be a different kind of background, that actually that kind of movement might work in a more enclosed junction, somewhere in the city, or kind of where there's buildings around as well. Now, the other part of this was the notion of the tripod. I know Lucas was saying in the comments about use a take a tripod everywhere you can. And I know you've talked about the problem is because you're going to work and back, carrying a tripod around with you isn't always easy. In this, you talked about resting it on a wall or a gate post or something like that, I think. And here we go back to that idea of, that I've mentioned a couple of times, which is if you're out and about, a bean bag. I think of creating a little bean bag, roughly about this kind of size, is a really useful thing to do. Whether you're sort of filling it with a little polystyrene balls, or you're being a bit more organically sensitive and using lentils or split peas or something like that, bean bags are fantastic because they will just, it only needs to be this big, so you can probably fit it in a bag more easily, certainly than a tripod. And if you put it on a gatepost or a fence, it will mould itself around it. So if you've got a slightly rough surface of a wall or something, which you might be worrying about scratching your camera with, it's not going to. You sit the beanbag, and then it will also, you can push the camera into it and it sinks into it, and you can sort of move and adjust the camera much more easily on the beanbag. So if you can't carry a tripod around with you, a beanbag is absolutely invaluable. And like I said, you can create one yourself really quite easily. And then I think you said you'd already done this, but for anybody who didn't catch it, it's well worth remembering that if you are doing something like that and you don't have a remote cable release, you can buy cable release things for most cameras, where there's a little slot where you put it in, so you can stand back from the camera and press a button. So, or you can do them electronically and wirelessly as well. But if you're not playing around at that level, quite simply setting the camera on a 2-second timer means you can go click, and then within that 2 seconds the camera stopped wobbling, and then it can take the photo. Part of the problem is because you're doing a very slow shutter speed of half a second, 1 second, 5 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds or more, the act of actually pressing the shutter can cause the camera to move, and you end up with camera blur. So that 2-second shutter, whatever you've got on your camera, I think you said 3 seconds. I know my one's got a 2, so that's probably why I'm defaulting to that. So set the timer for it to go, and then play an experiment. But I think your real thing is go and check out some spots before it's dark and start thinking, what's a good landscape? What's a good area to try this out in? Where's a nice junction? Are there interesting buildings? Are there interesting shapes? Are there interesting, whether it's a clock tower or the edge of an old building or a new building, or is there places where there's even glass reflected buildings where you might get the trails and you'll get the reflections of them as well? Are there places where there's even shops around where you might have some people moving and some people very still while they're looking in a shop window, and you'll get that real sense of movement where some are kind of half blurred, some are very static, and then you've got the light trails as well. There's, I think, a whole fun area to explore there, really, VG. The main thing is, of course, getting the camera steady, getting your exposure settings right, but primarily find the spot first and then add the movement into it, rather than feeling that you're not out there to grab the trails first. You get the place first, and then put the trails into it. And I think then you'll find that the quality of the output, the picture, will then suddenly become something that just has everybody going, wow, I really want to look at this. I really find this is amazing. How did you do it? And then you can sit there and have your smug moment. Okay, so I hope that helps, VG. Right, let's flip back to the comments. VG says, yeah, there was a curved path, but it was tricky to capture. You found it better with buildings in the background and having the rear lights of cars. Oh yeah, Rosie says, my lovely friend Jill made me a beanbag for Christmas. It's fabulous, beautifully made, so light to carry and great to use, especially with my big lens. I take it with me all the time. Oh, well, that's good to know, Rosie. Well, there you go. I mean, I can talk about these things, but here you go. Validation from Rosie too. So that's brilliant. Okay, and Vici said what I meant by 3 seconds is the time. Okay, so you've got a 3 second timer. I've got a 2 second or a 10 second. I think those are my options. Excellent. Okay. Right. So what are we going to move on to next? Right. I think what we'll talk about next is Lucas. It's sort of another long exposure type photo. So where are we? Let's scroll down. And so this is Lucas's photo. Lucas says, "Hi, I took this picture a few months ago in Southend." So Southend seaside resort known for its pier, which is of course the main part of this picture. I used a 28 to 70mm lens, f14, 30 seconds, ISO 100. My question is there any way to achieve much longer exposure without a huge amount of money being spent on ND filters, ND neutral density filters? I did some post-processing to make it look like the exposure was longer, but I'm not very happy with the final result. Okay, so I think really the fact is here, Lucas, is that it's not overly aware of its long... I mean, this has become a very high-key picture. And part of the problem is that if you've taken this in daylight and you've given it a long exposure, vast amounts of light have come in through the lens. Everything except the darkest parts of that pier, the darkest shadows, have essentially just become blown out. Now, it makes for an interesting photo. It becomes very drawing-like or sketch-like, you know, as we talked about, like with the high-key shot you did of your son a couple of weeks ago. There's a sort of similarity to the effect that it has. But what you seem to be talking about is something quite different to what you've achieved here. Now, basically, the way long exposure, you do something like a long exposure. When you have long exposure, you let more light into the camera. What that also does is, just like it smooths out movement. So just like VG's taught, lines, across the course of a second or two, a car has moved from one edge of the image to the other, and all you can see is the light trail. You can't see the car itself. Now, when you do that with, say, the sea, the movement of the waves coming up and moving up and down, and the tide coming in and out, and the waves moving forward, also kind of blur out and become smooth and misty. And but the problem is in order to do something like a 3-second, 5-second, 10-second, or in your case 30-second exposure, if you do that in daylight, there is so much light coming in through the lens that essentially it whites everything out. Now, you can adjust that by, first of all, you put your ISO to 100, which Lucas has done. And then what you also do is you narrow your aperture as much as you can. So Lucas has said he's gone to f14. I don't know how narrow you will go. If you could go to f22, can you go to f32? What's the narrowest aperture you can get? You go to that. But that might still not be enough. Now, this is the point whereby then people get ND filters, neutral density filters. And what these are essentially, it's like a little piece of glass which you screw onto the front of the lens, and it's pretty much sunglasses. It works in exactly the way sunglasses do. You've got, you're cutting out the amount of light, just like sunglasses are cutting out the amount of light hitting your eyes. These things cut out the amount of light hitting the lens. And what that means is you can have the exposure for longer to get the same amount of light in. So, a very quick way, stick a pair of sunglasses, if they're big enough, over the front of the lens. Not brilliant. I know somebody who's used welding glass, held it over the front. The problem with that is it's green, only any good if you're going to be converting it to black and white, no good for colour images. The real thing then is to go back when there is as little light as possible. So don't go on a sunny day. If you've seen the photos that Greg Braun has putting a few over the last couple of months, his shots on Dartmoor and in the Lake District, where he's got waterfalls and rivers which have got that smooth, creamy effect. Now, he is using filters, but what he's also doing is he's tending to go there just after sunset. He's taking his photos after the sun has dropped below the horizon. So there's less light in the sky. There's less light all around. And that means you can have a longer exposure without worrying about blowing out everything. So pretty much, I would say, if you're not wanting to fork out for the ND filters, then what you're looking to do, and you've already, so you're not wanting to fork out for the ND filters, but at the same time, you've already gone to as narrow an aperture as you can, and you still can't get the shutter speed as long as you want it without it being too high, then you just need less light from nature. So it really is as straightforward as go back in the evening, go back as the sun's just disappeared beyond the horizon, try the shots as it gets darker and darker. You should be able to find that you can expose for longer and longer periods. There will be lights all along the pier, which will then reflect in the water. Now, it's possible if you expose for too long, then the lights from the pier might also blow everything out. So you're going to have to play around with it a bit and see how you get on. So really, that's the best thing I think I can suggest, is just go back there at a different time of the, go back there in the evening. And if actually you can get that blue hour, which is the hour just after sunset or the hour just before sunrise, where you've still got some colour in the sky, but it's not gone completely black yet, but the lights have come on along the pier, I can imagine that being a really quite fun, interesting kind of photo. And then if you can do that for something like a 30-second exposure, so that the sea will also be reflecting the lights from the pier, then I think you could end up with something really interesting indeed. So see how you get on with that, Lucas. I hope that's useful. And if you have any kind of success with that, if you're next time near Southend or anywhere else, do make sure you share the photos with us, because I'd love to see them. Okay, hope that was useful. Right, how are we getting on? Rosie's saying to Jill she should go into lockdown production of beanbags. Yeah, Jill, go ahead and do that. I think there's definitely there's a micro business to be had there. Yeah, Jill says she should. Peter's come in. Peter was one of the Peaky Blinders crew as well for the shoot. Says Happy New Year. Doing the Peaky Blinders shoot was just the best experience, and your photos made me smile. Well, thanks, Peter. I'm glad they do. They always make me smile too. Okay, Lucas says, I could go to f/22, but the quality of the image drops off a bit. I suppose that's a good point. That's a good point, is that most lenses, it's worth remembering, whilst they might go from 2.8 through to 22 or even 32, at the most extremes, the quality isn't usually there. The best quality is just in a bit from that. So yeah, no, that's a good point. Okay, Rosie says, I bought a set of ND filters from eBay for about £15, 20 pieces. Well, obviously they're not the same quality as Lee filters, but they do the job. I've used them on waterfalls with great effect. Lucas says, I got one ND filter, but images are much softer with it, and I really like sharp images. I suppose it's just trying to get the quality of the glass. A good ND filter isn't going to make any difference, shouldn't make any difference. It should be completely clear, as in neutral density. That's what the ND is supposed to be. It shouldn't be softening up the image. The only thing that should be softening is the moving parts, the water, the light trails, the people, the whatever. And the moving, but anything, if you've got your camera on a tripod and it's perfectly steady, then anything that would be sharp without the filter on should still be sharp with the filter on. So maybe it's a poor quality, or maybe there's some kind of fault within it. But yet maybe it's worth, whether it's getting secondhand ones on eBay, or I don't know. I haven't really, I borrowed some ND filters once, didn't really get a chance to use them much beyond, I think it was back when we had a don't know where my head's going tonight for words. Eclipse. That's right. There was an eclipse a few years ago, and I wanted to photograph the eclipse, and I borrowed some filters to be able to do that. That's the only time I've actually used them. But I do know that good quality filters shouldn't be making any difference to the sharpness of the image. So it might be a case of just having to play around with them. And like I say, really, the other option is just to go back in the evening and try it at that point. But if you're wanting those pictures where you've got the sun in the picture as the sun is setting, and you've still got that smooth, creamy movement of water, at that point you really are going to have to get the filters. Right, okay, so On to the next one. Okay, Becca. Yeah, okay, Becca. Let's find your picture. Sorry, just close off some of these other ones for the moment. And Becca says, I took this last Sunday in the grounds of Felbrigg Hall. They had a lovely display of various animals made from willow. I settled for this as the real ones weren't to be seen that day. Okay, so no deer about, so let's go for the willow deer. I'm finding that I'm settling into a specific style now with desaturated colours. Okay, so you've already created the kind of colour scheme that you wanted with this. That's fine. My issue is with this is I use Lightroom. I only have my iPhone to edit and use the Heal Clone tool. I took the fence out, but feel the middle layer needs something. Okay, so in essence, what's happened here now? Becca did send me the original for this as well. Here's the original photo. You can see how much she's been playing around with the coolness of the colours, desaturating a bit and creating a particular effect that she's got a fondness for. But we can see in the original here that there's a fence kind of running through the middle of it. Oh, sorry, that's back into... and having taken out the fence because she felt it got in the way, she's now wondering a little bit about the middle ground. What is there sort of something... should there be something there instead? To be honest, I don't think it's... I think part of the thing with this one, Becca, is I'm kind of sort of slightly struck by the crop. I'll show you what I mean. I think there's nothing wrong particularly with having something in the foreground or something in the background and not necessarily anything in between. I do feel like there's way too much sky up here and not quite enough room on the left of this. Let me just show you. If I bring this down a bit, sort of somewhere, so let's do roughly that kind of rule of thirds bit, drag this out a bit. I'll use that content aware button just to give us a sense of what's going on. It's just, and then crop that. I think that automatically has a slightly better feel to it. This has extended a tree branch up there, which looks a little bit odd. Doesn't really, I mean, we're only doing a very quick, so I'll just take that out for a moment. No, wrong one. I could do that forever, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so, and I think if you've kind of got, yeah, sorry, it isn't. I'm going to copy a little bit of, clone a little bit of tool over here. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, that was just irritating me. So yeah, it's okay to have then foreground and background. I just think that the way that it sat in the foreground, you had all this space above it. Let's just run back, show you the photo, which isn't doing anything other than it feels like there ought to be something in it. Now, if this was a poster for Come to Felbrigg Hall, great place to have the writing. But as a photo in its own right, you just sort of become aware of a whole bunch of nothing which isn't really adding to anything to the story. So to come back, crop that in, I think that kind of has a slightly better feel to it. And when you've got that, you don't tend to feel so much that there's anything missing in the midground. The only other thing that I would say, another aspect of this that sort of concerns me slightly, is the fact that this line of trees in the background is running at exactly the same level as the head, so that you've got the horns sticking up here, but this, let's just take the pencil tool, this line here, I kind of can't help but feel it would have worked better if you'd actually had the head, you know, that the head was either above or below the tree line in the background. If I just... Again, it's not going to be absolutely perfect, but just to give you a rough sense of what's going on. If we kind of remove this layer, not perfect, but it gives you a sense of, go smaller, just gives you a slightly better sense, I think, where you've actually got the head poking above. In fact, I might even just come under the chin a little bit, make that a little bit lower. Something like that. I think you end up with you've got more of a feel then that it's sort of breaking up the space. When you've got the neck and the head and the horns coming up, I think you want to kind of avoid the idea that they're on exactly the same layer as the background. And it's one of those things that we always have this sort of slight problem with when we're photographing. We see the willow deer, we take a photo of the willow deer because that's what we're focusing on. And we don't really notice the background because we're not thinking about that, we're thinking about the thing we're photographing. And it's only when we get back and sort of look at the picture on the computer screen do we suddenly go, oh, there's all this stuff in the background that I didn't like. I didn't even notice the fence was there. Now I've got to clone out the fence. I didn't realise the trees were where they were. And I think the more you do this kind of photography, the more you start to learn that you need to check, always sort of see where the background is. Whatever it is you're photographing in the foreground, is there something in the background which is kind of interfering with it? And I think, it's even like if we go back to the unedited version here, you can see this line of tree is sort of becoming a bit of a distraction. It's probably why you kind of cropped in closer, but it's sort of the need to, and even though you kind of got rid of a bit of that, the edge of the tree here is interfering. So if you had sort of moved round to your right just a little bit, then that tree would have been hidden behind. Or if you moved a fraction to your left, the tree would have been out of shot, wouldn't have been interfering with the stag, rather than where it's kind of overlapping. And similarly, I think if you just lowered yourself really by about 6 inches to a foot, suddenly the head would have been above the tree line, and then you would, I think that, maybe if you'd had the tree line kind of cutting through the neck, mid-neck, or alternatively, you stand on tiptoe or stand on a stool or a box or something, and you then have the head within the tree line, although I think actually that might have made it a bit too busy. But I think if you've got that, once you've kind of got your background line fine, we've taken out the tree, we've pulled down that large space out the back. Now we've got the deer as the sculpture in the foreground without actually having to worry about the background competing with it. And that's part of the problem with the other ones, is the background is competing either because of the great big white patch at the top, or because of the busyness of the trees running straight through the head, or right by the head. And remember, when you're photographing people or animals, it's the head which is the most important part. That's the bit that, as humans, we've evolved to look straight at first. So that's the bit that needs to be kind of clear, or to, even if you've got leading lines, drawing the attention to. But you don't want stuff interfering with it in the background. So I don't know whether that helps. I hope it does, Becca. Like I said, once you kind of get to that stage, I think you're not really missing anything in the mid-ground behind where that fence was. I think it's really because this is about the stag, and then the background is just a supporting act to the sculpture. So anyway, I hope that helps. Right, okay, where are we at? So VG says cropping some space is a good idea. The horns had a green tinge. I think the greenishness was actually part of the colouring filters that Becca's been using, and the style that she wants to edit it in. Stacey says, I was just about to ask if shot low, would it have mattered? Yeah, so I think that is that you just shoot a little bit lower so the head's clear against the sky. I think would have worked probably slightly better. Cool. Right. Okay. All right. Okay. Becca's come in. Yes, thank you. I had those thoughts afterwards. Yeah. And was disappointed I hadn't thought of it whilst I was there, but there could be a return trip. But this is it, Becca. This is brilliant. It's good that you had those thoughts afterwards, and if what I'm saying is echoing what you'd kind of thought as well, then that's reinforcement. Then you know that your thoughts were on the right line, which is really good. There's this phrase, I know I've used it before, it's one of these things that occurs to me on a near daily basis, but I love it, which is experience is something you gain almost immediately after you needed it the most. Actually, forget the almost. Experience is something you gain immediately after you needed it the most. And I love that phrase. It's so true. And having gone through that experience, next time you're there, you won't make those mistakes. That's how we learn. And again, one of the things I've said a lot of times over the last 9 months is, whilst we get the praise for the things that work, we learn from the things that don't. If we don't make mistakes, we don't learn. We get things wrong and we feel a bit embarrassed, or we feel, roll our eyes, or we go, how on earth did I do that? How on earth did I miss that? And that's just enough for us to go, right, well, next time I'm making a change to that. And then we advance, and then our photos get better. So great that you recognise that as well. And Sandra says she likes the desaturated colour effects on the photo. So you've got a fan for that as well, Becca. Brilliant. Cool. Okay, so where are we at now then? So Sandra. Okay. Now, where are we at? Let me close that, find that, and double click on this. And Sandra says, I would welcome feedback, hints and tips on outdoor portrait photography. I go on a number of days out with my nephew each year, and I take some photos of him and use the best 12 for a calendar. So a nephew calendar, wow. I don't take tons of equipment with me, but I still want to take the best images I can. I'm also interested in what I can do in Photoshop to enhance the photos. This is straight out of the camera. Happy New Year, everyone. Right, well, there's a huge amount of what you're talking about within that. Kind of, how do I take better photos and how to edit them in Photoshop becomes years of practice. But starting point, I mean, there's an interesting, I like the fact that what you've done here with this one is, I mean, it becomes an interesting thing in itself that he's up against a reflective surface, some kind of mirror. And so you've got him, you've got the reflection, you've got the graffiti, there's a little bit of graffiti over his shoulder, but really you've got this bright, bold, colourful graffiti in the reflection. And I think that's really nicely observed, well caught. Now, interestingly, Ursula came in and gave in the comments during the week, said it's a beautiful photo and a good memory for you. People photography is not my usual fare, but in any type of photography, I think it's crucial to have the focus on what you want to be the main point of your image, no matter how small a part of the whole it is. It needs to be sharp. In people pictures, I always look at the eyes. And here they seem slightly out of focus. The sharpest part seems to be in the front of his coat, maybe his nose. I'm thinking that sharp focus on the eyes would be good, otherwise I really like it. So I do want to address that point first, because Ursula's absolutely smack bang on the money with this. When you are photographing people, the first thing we do is we look at the eyes. Because in evolutionary terms, what our ancestors had to deal with, the eyes can tell us whether the person we're facing is potentially hostile or not. Are they glaring at us? Are they angry with us? Beyond, they might be trying to control what they're doing with our body language, but their eyes will give away an awful lot. So we have a whole chunk of our frontal lobe devoted to reading expressions on people's faces, and we zero in on the eyes. So any form of portraiture, the eyes are the most important part, and they have to be sharp. They do, when you're focusing your camera, focus it on the eyes first. Everything else can be slightly out of focus, but if the eyes are in focus, you can pretty much get away with it most of the time. But everything else can be in focus, and if the eyes are out of focus, it just never quite looks right. So one of the things when we're creating a photo, we have a core part of the photo, the main part of the narrative, the thing that we want to draw everybody's attention to. If you're talking portraits, then it's the face and specifically the eyes. And then the tools we have to enhance that are, we can use colour, we can use light and shade, and we can use focus, and we can use leading lines. I think there's other ones as well, but consider those as the main ones. So just in terms of focus, our eye will get drawn to the sharper part of the photo before it will get drawn to a blurrier part of the photo. The brain will kind of filter out the blurrier part. It's not deemed to be important. It will go straight to the sharp part. So yes, always make sure that the eyes are the sharpest part. Next up, there's the notion of the background, where if you're talking about you want to be taking more photos of your nephew in different places, you're looking for the background, and is the background enhancing or detracting from the story you're wanting to tell? And the background, now, so here what you've got is you've got this wonderful brightly coloured graffiti background. So it creates it very much in this, and the skyscrapers shooting up in the background as well. So it places him very much in this city environment. So that works well. You're competing slightly in terms of light and dark, where while his face is lighter against, you've got a dark hat and you've got a dark coat, which means the attention gets drawn to the brighter contrast part of the face. Because you've got a light patch up in the top right corner here with dark patches, that's also a very strong contrast point. So that becomes another part which is grabbing the attention. So if we were to take this into Photoshop, just to edit it a bit, one of the things you might want to do is darken down this area. So, I mean, it's like, if I just quickly filter, camera raw filter, I'll just add a vignette, which is where you darken in around the corners. So in camera raw, I just go to optics, grab the vignette slider and slide it down. You can see it sort of darkens in around the corners a bit. That automatically takes the attention away from some of the corners. Now this is still a bit too bright. Maybe we would darken it down even more. If I take the curves, I could darken down the picture, something like that. And then using the masking or the anti-masking tool, lighten up your nephew again, and we don't need the whole lot dark. We just so just make that a little bit. We're just trying to make. Let's bring some of the colour back in here. We're just trying to make sure that this corner over here isn't too dark. So if I just group those together, you can see the difference then between that and that, and you can play around with that. Maybe just don't have to have all these bits in dark, but just as a very quick edit. Between that and that is we now get drawn much more towards his face. The background, we've got the background being an interesting background here, but it's not, but this lighter part up here isn't grabbing our attention away from him. So I would say you've already got a sense, the way you've done this shows me that you've got a sense of place. You know that there's interesting places you can go and take photos of him. What you're trying to do then is when you're trying to make sure that the background is an enhancement to the photo, not a detraction from it. So the first thing with any portrait is it's about the face. You then decide whether you're taking photos of him looking directly into the camera, as in this, or whether you want him looking away from the camera. We've talked before about the difference of whether we're, as an observer, you look at me, I'm not looking at you. You can observe without fear of being seen. When I turn around and look at the camera, I'm looking at you. You can't observe me in exactly the same way. Now, you can, because I'm talking over a webcam and I can't actually see you. But our bits of our brain have to kind of work past that. If I'm staring straight into the lens, you tend to look at me in a slightly different way than if I'm not looking at the lens. So really, when we're coming down to sort of taking portraits, it's the face, it's the eyes being sharp, and then your background is about adding to the atmosphere of it. So there's a few ideas in that, quite a bit to unload. I know we've barely scratched the surface on a lot of different things we could do, but I hope that gives you some kind of sort of starting point, Sandra. Okay, well, thanks very much for sending that in. And let's go back, see if we have any more comments. And all right, we don't seem to have any comments on that part. Stacey's, you're right, returning to areas if you can to do the shot better, I think is still referring to Becca's deer picture. Okay, cool. Now, one more picture I'm going to talk about is Robert's. But what I also want to, before you all go rushing off straight afterwards, I also want to point out the fact that next week we are going to be having a challenge. It's the January, we'll do a podcast special, challenge special, and the theme is going to be new beginnings. So after I've talked about Robert's picture, I'm going to talk a little bit about new beginnings, try and give you some ideas of what you might want to do for entering the challenge for next week. And in the meantime, again, if you'd like to support these podcasts, buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. If you would like to put your own photos in for feedback, then Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, type it into Facebook. If on the odd chance that you don't do Facebook and you're watching these on YouTube, and you regularly watch them on YouTube, you can still take part. Email me, message me the images. Again, tell me what it is, what aspect of the photo it is that you're struggling with or you would like help with, and I'll do my best to help. I will talk through it and then put it into the next podcast. Cool. Okay. So, on to Robert's photo. Try and click there and click there. Now this was Robert having fun with composites. So Robert says this is a composite of a single match igniting at high speed shutter speed. So basically he's got a camera which has got a high shutter speed thing and he's gone click, 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 click. And so he's got a whole number of photos of the light starting to flare up, catching, lighting, and then going out. He says, I couldn't figure out how to line them up properly in Photoshop, so I used Microsoft Paint. Lightroom was used to edit the colour, and Photoshop to mask out the ignition source. Okay, so presumably whether that was you were using another lighter or another match or something to light the match, so you've cloned that out. I will be shooting this again to fix some mistakes and would make the image clearer if possible. What could I have done better? And Anne had also chimed in on the comment to say, I didn't take the photo, but I did help hold the match. Yep, collaborative effort. It's like when I did the photo of the mince pies, Maggie, as well as making the mince pies, was the one pouring down the icing sugar as well. It's always very handy if you have a partner, somebody else to help you with some of these things where you're trying to concentrate on focusing the camera. So, cool. Now, the first thing I noticed, and you said you didn't line it up and you couldn't work out how to put them into Photoshop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this into Photoshop because I think the main thing with a photo like this, Robert... okay, first of all, actually, just before I get onto that bit, let me close these ones. I will say, I think it's a great idea. It's a fun idea, this one, Robert. It's... yeah, great idea. So you've got this whole sequence and you've put the sequence into a single image. Now, the thing about when you're doing a sequential image composite is you've got to be really precise. It's a point of technical excellence, or is what you're really pursuing with this. So if things aren't quite there, it feels sloppy. That's a horrible word. I don't really want to use, but it doesn't feel like you've done it to the level that it could have been done. And with a photo like this, you don't want anybody going, why are the matches closer together there and wider apart over there? Why are the matches not quite straight? Why are the matches at slightly different heights? Because if they're thinking that, they're not going, oh wow, what a cool photo, look at the way the light changes. Which is what you're wanting them to think. So if you're going to do these sequential images, you've got to really get the technicals right. Now, the first thing I notice with this is, now in Photoshop, if I go up to the rulers and I just click and I can drag down, and I can drag down a guideline. And if I stick this guideline here, well, you have got the top of the matches lined up. That's fine. But if I take a guideline here, that match is tilted. That match is tilted. That match is tilted. That match is tilted. They're all tilted slightly to the left. So if what I really want to do is just straighten those a little bit, yeah, so I can just use the grids there to make sure that they're all absolutely straight up. I'll use the content aware there just to fill in the spaces. So now they're all straight up, which helps with my OCD about line straightness. But when we bring this line down here, what we find is they're no longer lined up. The ones over on the right are lower down than the ones on the left, because you had them lined up, but each match was tilted. The next problem that we've got is this uneven spread. And I think, again, now what you can do in Photoshop, I don't know whether you can do it in other programs, but within Photoshop, there is a little bit up here where if we go to View, Rulers. Now I have them on automatically. You'll suddenly notice it's changed shape because I took them off. So I go to View, Rulers. You can see that I've now got up and along the top and down at the side. And what I can also do with those rulers, if I right click on them, I can have them set in millimeters, centimeters, or pixels, or as a percent, or inches. So there's options there, Robert, to decide on that. Now what that allows you to do is, if I take this and if I take this first match, put a line through there, that's say at the 20, I come to this next one, that's at 80. So there's a 60 millimeter gap between them. When I put one here, this isn't at 140, it's at a sort of 145. So that's not quite 60. And then this one is at about 210. So there's like there's over 70. There's about sort of 75 here, and so it goes on. So by the time we get to this one, there's nearly 100 millimeters between one and the other. And then when we come over to the end, it's gone quite narrow again. But it's not even getting evenly wider and evenly narrower. So this is where it just doesn't quite feel right. And I think the thing to do is you need to kind of decide on the width. So you decide, you pick a width, and that might be, say, in this case, 50 or 60. And then you line them up so that they are all the same width. They're all the same width, and also the head is lined up in exactly the same space there as well. So on the vertical and the horizontal, you have exactly what you're wanting. Or you're stacking them so they kind of go up and then back down again, or you're doing them in or out, but whatever pattern you decide to do, the pattern kind of needs to feel consistent. And the inconsistency detracts you from the main part of the narrative. And the main part of the narrative of this is the change. And if everything else is exactly the same, then the change becomes the only bit we focus on. The brain will ignore the other bits. But because the other bits are also different, the height or the width, we're no longer, the brain is going, oh, there's differences there, and we're noticing that. So we're no longer noticing, as with the same level of attention, the whole point of the photo. Couple of other things I might suggest is this goes right to the corner, and just remove those rulers for the moment. No, not the rulers. I want to sort of remove the lines. That's what I wanted to do. So I kind of feel like you need a little bit more space either side. Just again, give it a little bit of room to breathe. You don't want those pushed right up against the edge. The other thing that crosses my mind here is you've got the non-lit match up through the different stages of lighting to the lit match. And then this one, there's the tiniest puff of smoke there. And I would kind of almost want, I think it would be quite fun if you've blown it out, or you know, however you've extinguished it, would be to have a smoke trail, you know, and you could even have 2 or 3 going off at the end, where you've got one with a longer smoke trail and a shorter, and then none again, so that the final one has got nothing on it, which is echoing the first one, which has nothing on it. So I think really, if you're talking about ways you could improve this photo, and I love the concept, I think it's a great idea, Robert, but I think everything comes down to you give it room to breathe, and you have an evenness of spacing. And you really, I mean, you can do it in Photoshop. If you take, I mean, supposing, okay, let's just do this for a moment. Let's just say we take that photo, file, new, create, paste. So say that's the photo you've got, and then you've got a whole bunch of others like that. Basically, what you do is you go to image canvas size, anchor it on the left where it says anchor, and that means when you make changes, it's going to make changes up or down or sideways, but it will fix itself. So if I fix this on the left, it says width 75. If I change that to, say, 675, now what we have is we have this with all this on the back. And now if I paste these on, I can move them about. So what you would do is get your matches at each level, you know, each one that you've cropped, line them up, and, you know, maybe you would get your rulers. So if I view rulers, set these at, that's going to be, you know, I've got that at 40, so I'll have that at, so I'm going to set these at 60 apart. I'll have that at 100, I'll have that at 106, no, say 50, I've got that wrong. Where are we going? 40 to 100, oh, that's a 180, that's why. 160, 200, etc. And then move these so that they line up where you want them to. And maybe you create another little one that comes down here to make sure you get the right height, and so on. So you can see then how, you know, that you can line them all up perfectly and build them in Photoshop by using the rulers and guidelines. And then that way I think you'll be able to get the effect that you want, and people will just look at it and go, oh, lovely idea, rather than lovely idea but something's not quite working. So I hope that works. And like I said, I think it'd be quite fun actually just to have a couple of little smoke shots trailing off at the end as well. But give it room to breathe, a little bit of space. You don't need to be right up against the edge either. Have as much space either side of the matches on the end as you do between the matches. So if you've gone for 60 millimeters in between the matches, have at least 60 millimeters on either side. You could possibly even go slightly wider to contain it. But I hope, anyway, that's really what I wanted to say about that. So I hope you find that one useful. Robert. Okay, cool. So where are we? Okay, Sandra says, oh, I found the feedback really useful. Kim gives me some ideas for next time. I will watch what you have said again to see if I can replicate in Elements. Okay, cool, Sandra. Glad that was useful. And Robert says, sloppy is the right word. Sorry. I couldn't space them evenly in Paint. There was a limit to the width. There was also, altogether, there were 300 megabytes in files. Paint is not good for that. No, you really do. You're much better off working in Photoshop. You have Photoshop, so you may as well use it that way. And Stacey says, smoke Should have been a puff. That would have made it a bit more interesting. Yeah, I think it's just that notion of, yeah, a little kind of trail of smoke. And Rob says, I will use this in my next attempt. Excellent. Okay, cool. So what I want to do then is that's all the pictures that we've had put in for this week. Next week then is not so much a one for feedback, although you're still perfectly entitled to stick some images in for critique if you want. But what I really want to do is the next week is the January challenge, and the challenge is new beginnings. Now, new beginnings can mean any number of things, and so this is where I want you to be creative. You can either go out there and create a new photo, or you can go and rummage back through your archives and see if you can find something which you really think fits, edit it up how you would like it. The idea with the challenge photos is much more about the idea of let's share some ideas, let's inspire each other. Okay, so your take on new beginnings is going to be different to somebody else's take on it. So examples might be new beginnings. Well, there's always babies, whether it's humans or animals. You know, here's your new grandson, here's a new kitten, here's a new baby hedgehog, here's a baby salamander, here's an egg cracking open with a beak poking through it. So there's that kind of thing. There's the notion of, if you're using plants, new growth, shoots coming up, flowers just about to open. So those kind of things. You can have, mind you, I mean, but beginnings can also be beginnings of a process. So like cookery, it can be a set of ingredients, you know, getting your ingredients ready because you're going to bake something, or weighing something out. New beginnings for a cake. You'd have thought, I was going to say, you'd have thought I'd been kind of caked out now over the Feastmas eating season, but the problem is you don't get into a habit of it, and now we're kind of returning to some normality of food. My body's just going, where's the chocolate? Or similarly, laying out the tools before you start a job. You know, new beginnings if you're going to be making something. You know, I mean, anybody who ever did those little Airfix kits or modelling kits where you've sort of laid out your glue and your pieces and the little plastic frames where you had to kind of break things out of. It can be sketches or plans. Or maybe it can be a part of your life. You're getting that tattoo to mark the fact that you've just turned 50. New beginnings can mean anything, and what I want is your take on what new beginnings could be. Stick your fingers into the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group, or I'll set up an event page. You can stick it on the event page. If you're watching this on YouTube and you would like to take part, email me the picture that you would like to put in, and with all of them, tell me, write a little bit about what it is, why you decided to take that photo, why it means new beginnings to you, and if there's any interesting aspects to it, any interesting aspects to the story of how it came about, of problems you had to overcome, of camera settings you weren't expecting but had to do, let me know about those as well. Because it's one of the things I found when I've been doing these challenges, it's not just the image, it's the story behind the image, which is so fascinating. And it's the bit that everybody always seems to respond to in the comments as well. It's not just me. We love the photos, but we love the stories behind the photos. So we'll do that, and then we'll get back in 2 weeks' time. We'll come back and go through the images for the critique again. So that's new beginnings next week. That's it for tonight. Thank you ever so much for everybody who's contributed, whether you've commented or you've sent in images. That's what makes these podcasts so much fun. So next week, Tuesday the 12th of January, that's new beginnings. And in the meantime, hope you all have a wonderful week. Thanks very much. Take care. And there we go. Cheerio.